Let me ask you a question that might make you uncomfortable. How much money do you think you need to retire? $1 million, right? That is the number everyone talks about. It is the magic threshold, the finish line, the golden ticket to financial freedom. But here's what nobody tells you. The vast majority of Americans will never see $1 million in their retirement accounts, not even close. And the statistics are so shocking, so contrary to what the financial media wants you to believe, that I think most people are living in a complete fantasy about their financial future. I have spent over 70 years studying money. I have watched fortunes made and lost. I have seen market cycles come and go. I have analyzed thousands of companies and met with countless investors. And what I have learned about how ordinary Americans actually save for retirement is deeply troubling. Today, I am going to share the real numbers with you, the actual data on who has $1 million saved for retirement. And I promise you, it is shockingly few. But more importantly, I am going to explain what this means for you and how to think about building real wealth, regardless of where you are starting from. Let me take you back to 1956. I was 26 years old, and I had just started my investment partnership in Omaha at that time. The concept of retirement savings as we know it today barely existed. There were pensions, sure. Some companies took care of their workers. But the idea that every American should personally save $1 million for retirement, that would have seemed absolutely absurd. $1 million in 1956 had the purchasing power of roughly $10 million today. The entire concept of ordinary people becoming millionaires through disciplined saving was essentially unheard of. Only business owners, executives, and the genuinely wealthy had that kind of money. But something changed over the decades. The 401k was invented in 1978. Individual retirement accounts expanded. The financial services industry exploded. And suddenly everyone was told they needed to save $1 million or more for retirement. The goalposts moved dramatically. And yet, despite 50 years of this messaging, despite all the financial literacy programs, despite all the retirement calculators and planning tools, the actual numbers tell a very different story than what the financial media would have you believe. Here is the framework for understanding what I am about to share with you. I am going to walk you through 4 critical realities about retirement savings in America. First, the actual statistics on who has $1 million saved. Second, why the numbers are so much worse than people think. Third, what this means for your own financial planning. And fourth, how to build genuine wealth regardless of where you stand today. Let me start with the second most important point, which is understanding why the statistics are even worse than they appear on the surface. When you see headlines about average retirement savings, you need to understand something crucial about how those numbers are calculated. Averages lie. They lie spectacularly. If I walk into a room with 9 people who have nothing saved for retirement and 1 person who has $10 million, the average savings in that room is $1 million per person. But the median, the number in the middle, is 0. 9 out of 10 people have nothing. This is exactly what happens when you look at retirement statistics. The financial services industry loves to quote averages because averages make the situation look manageable. But the median tells the real story according to the Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances, which is the most comprehensive study of American wealth. The median retirement account balance for families approaching retirement, those between 55 and 64 years old, is approximately $134,000. That is the middle. Half of families have less than that. Think about that for a moment. Half of Americans within a decade of retirement have less than $134,000 saved. At a 4% withdrawal rate, which is what most financial planners recommend, that would provide about $5,000 per year, about $400 per month. That is not a retirement. That is barely survival money. Now, let me tell you the actual statistic that should shock everyone. Based on the most recent data available, only about 10% of American households have saved $1 million or more for retirement. 10%. and this includes people of all ages. When you look specifically at people who are actually retired, people 65 and older, the percentage with $1 million or more drops even further. We are talking about somewhere between 3 and 7% of retirees, depending on how you measure it and what sources you use. Let me repeat that because I want it to sink in. Somewhere between 93 and 97% of retired Americans do not have $1 million in retirement savings. This is the reality that the financial services industry does not want you to know. All those commercials showing happy retirees sailing boats and playing golf, those represent a tiny fraction of the population. The vast majority of Americans are struggling. I have thought long and hard about why this happens, and I have identified several factors that explain this gap between expectations and reality. First, there is the tyranny of compound interest working in reverse. Everyone loves to talk about how compound interest makes you wealthy, and it does if you start early and stay consistent. But for most Americans, compound interest works against them. Credit card debt compounds, student loans compound, mortgages compound, medical debt compounds. For most families, the interest they pay out vastly exceeds the interest they earn. They are on the wrong side of the compound interest equation. Second, wages have not kept pace with the cost of living. In 1970, a typical worker could support a family on one income, own a home, and still save for retirement. Today, even with two incomes, many families are barely keeping up with housing, health care, and education costs. There is simply nothing left to save. Third, the shift from pensions to 401k plans transferred all the risk to workers. Companies used to guarantee retirement income. Now workers are on their own to save, invest wisely, and hope the markets cooperate. Most people are not equipped for this responsibility, and the results show it. Fourth, healthcare costs have become catastrophic. A serious illness can wipe out a lifetime of savings in months. Americans spend more on healthcare than any other developed nation, and much of that spending comes directly out of retirement funds. Fifth, and this is something I have observed repeatedly throughout my career, most people simply do not understand money. They do not understand compound interest. They do not understand the difference between assets and liabilities. They do not understand that buying a bigger house or a newer car is not building wealth. It is destroying it. Now let me get to the most important point, which is what these statistics actually mean for you and how you should think about your own financial future. Here's what I want you to understand. The $1 million threshold is both arbitrary and misleading. It has become a psychological barrier that paralyzes people instead of motivating them. When someone earning $50,000 per year hears they need to save $1 million for retirement, the math seems impossible at a 10% savings rate. That is $5,000 per year. Even with compound interest, reaching $1 million would take over 40 years. For many people, that timeline extends past their expected lifespan. So what happens? They give up, they figure retirement savings are pointless. They stop trying entirely, and that is the worst possible outcome. Here is the truth that the financial services industry does not want you to hear. You do not necessarily need $1 million to retire. What you need is enough income to cover your expenses, and there are multiple ways to get there. Social Security, despite its problems, provides a foundation. The average Social Security benefit is about $19,000 per year. For a married couple, that is almost $40,000 in guaranteed lifetime income. No, it is not luxurious, but it is real. If you can save even a modest amount on top of that, your situation improves dramatically. $100,000 in savings, invested properly, can generate $4,000 per year. Combined with Social Security, that is over $40,000 annually. Still not wealthy, but workable. The point is not to dismiss the importance of saving. I have spent my entire career advocating for rational financial behavior. The point is to understand that retirement planning is about matching your income to your expenses, not hitting an arbitrary number that may or may not be relevant to your situation. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. Back in the 1980s, I met a couple who had worked their entire lives as public school teachers in Nebraska. They had never earned more than $40,000 per year combined. By Wall Street standards, they should have been destined for financial struggle. But they did something remarkable. They lived below their means. They bought a modest house and paid it off. They drove used cars. They took vacations to national parks instead of expensive resorts. They avoided debt like it was a disease. When they retired, they had about $200,000 in savings, not $1 million, not even close. But here's the thing, their house was paid off. Their cars were paid off. They had no debt of any kind. Their monthly expenses were around $1,500. Between their teachers' pensions, Social Security, and a 4% withdrawal from their savings, they had over $4,000 per month in income. They were wealthy by any measure that actually matters. They could afford everything they needed and most of what they wanted. Meanwhile, I have seen people with $2 million in retirement savings who are struggling because they have mortgage payments, car payments, lifestyle expenses that consume everything they have. The number in your account matters far less than the relationship between your income and your expenses. This brings me to what I consider the most crucial insight about building wealth. Whether or not you ever reach $1 million, the secret to financial security is not about reaching a specific number. It is about building what I call an economic moat around your personal finances. Just like a business needs a competitive advantage that protects it from rivals, you need financial structures that protect you from the inevitable storms of life. What does this mean in practice? Let me give you the specific actions that matter most. First, eliminate all high-interest debt. Credit card debt at 18 or 20% interest is a financial emergency. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar that could be compounding in your favor instead of against you. Attack this debt with absolute ferocity. Second, build an emergency fund. Before you worry about retirement savings, make sure you have 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash. This prevents you from going into debt when unexpected expenses arise. And they always arise. Third, own your home free and clear if possible. I know this goes against what many financial advisors say about mortgage interest deductions and leverage, but the peace of mind that comes from knowing no one can take your home is worth more than any tax advantage. When you own your home outright, your monthly expenses drop dramatically, which means you need less income in retirement. Fourth, keep your lifestyle expenses low and flexible. The biggest mistake I see people make is expanding their lifestyle every time their income increases. They get a raise, they buy a bigger house, they get a bonus, they lease a fancier car. This is a trap. Every increase in fixed expenses means you need more savings to maintain that lifestyle in retirement. Fifth, invest in yourself. The best investment you can make is in your own earning power. Skills, knowledge, credentials, relationships. These generate returns that no financial asset can match. A person who increases their earning power by $10,000 per year has effectively created an asset worth $250,000 at a 4% yield. 6, start saving something, anything, as early as possible, even if you can only save $50 per month. Do it. The habit of saving matters more than the amount. Over time, as your income grows and your expenses stabilize, you can increase the amount, but the discipline must come first. 7th, invest simply and consistently. I have said this many times, and I will say it again. For the vast majority of investors, a low-cost index fund that tracks the S&P 500 is the best option. Do not try to pick individual stocks unless you are willing to dedicate the time and effort to truly understand businesses. Do not chase hot investments. Do not try to time the market. Just invest consistently in a diversified portfolio and let compound interest work for you over decades. Now let me synthesize all of this into a coherent picture of what we have discussed. The statistics on retirement savings are sobering. Only about 10% of American households have $1 million or more saved. The median retirement savings for people approaching retirement is well under $200,000. The vast majority of Americans are not prepared for retirement by conventional standards. But these statistics, as alarming as they are, do not tell the whole story. The $1 million threshold is arbitrary. What actually matters is the relationship between your income and your expenses in retirement. People with modest savings but low expenses can be perfectly comfortable. People with large savings but high expenses can be struggling. The number in your account is less important than your overall financial structure. The path to financial security involves eliminating debt, building an emergency fund, owning your home, keeping lifestyle expenses low, investing in your earning power, saving consistently, and investing simply. These principles have worked for decades. They will continue to work. They do not require you to be an investment genius. They do not require you to take enormous risks. They just require discipline, patience, and the wisdom to focus on what actually matters. Now, let me address some objections that I know people are thinking right now, because whenever I share these ideas, I hear the same pushback. Some people say, Warren, easy for you to talk about living below your means. You are a billionaire. You do not understand what it is like to struggle. But here is what those people do not know about me. I still live in the same house I bought in 1958 for $31,500. I drive my own car. I eat at the same diners I have been going to for 50 years. I drink cherry Coke. I could afford anything in the world. And I choose simplicity because I understand that possessions do not create happiness. More importantly, I was not always wealthy. I started with nothing. My first business was selling chewing gum door to door when I was 6 years old. I delivered newspapers in the freezing Nebraska winters. I saved every penny I could because I understood instinctively that money could work for me if I gave it the chance. The principles I am sharing are not theoretical. They are the exact principles I used to build my own wealth from nothing. They work regardless of your starting point. Other people say the system is rigged, that wealth inequality makes it impossible for ordinary people to get ahead. And there is truth to this critique. The gap between rich and poor has widened dramatically over my lifetime. Wages have stagnated while asset prices have soared. The game has gotten harder. But saying the game is rigged does not help you. You still have to play the game. And within the constraints of this imperfect system, the principles of building wealth still apply. You can complain about the unfairness, which accomplishes nothing. Or you can focus on what you can control, which is your own behavior. I have watched people from every background build financial security: teachers, mechanics, nurses, truck drivers, not because they earned high salaries, but because they understood something fundamental. It is not what you earn that matters. It is what you keep. Still others say that saving for retirement is pointless because Social Security will collapse, or the dollar will become worthless, or some other catastrophe will make all savings meaningless. This kind of catastrophizing serves no purpose except to justify inaction. Yes, there are risks in the world. There are always risks. But for over 200 years, through civil wars, world wars, depressions, and every kind of disaster imaginable, the American economy has continued to grow. Patient investors have been rewarded. If you genuinely believe the entire system will collapse, then no financial strategy matters anyway. But if you accept that there is a reasonable chance society will continue functioning, then rational preparation is the only sensible course of action. Let me also talk about the role of time in building wealth, because this is something most people fundamentally misunderstand. When I was 25, I had $14,000. Not a lot, but I treated that money like it was sacred. I understood that $14,000 invested at 10% per year would become over $1 million. By the time I was 65, every dollar I spent frivolously was not just a dollar lost. It was a future fortune squandered. This concept of opportunity cost is critical. When you spend a dollar today, you are not just losing that dollar. You are losing everything that dollar could have become. At average stock market returns, a dollar invested in your 20s could be worth $15 to $20 by retirement. A dollar invested in your 30s could be worth $8 to $10. A dollar invested in your 40s could be worth $4 to $5. This math changes how you think about spending. That $100 dinner is not really $100. It is potentially $2,000 of retirement money. That $30,000 car is not really $30,000. It is potentially $600,000 of future wealth. Now, I am not saying never enjoy life. That would be miserable and pointless. What I am saying is that every spending decision has consequences that compound over time. Understanding this changes how you make choices. I want to share another story that illustrates the power of consistent long-term thinking. In 1965, a woman named Grace Groner passed away in Lake Forest, Illinois. She had worked as a secretary at Abbott Laboratories for over 40 years. She never married. She never earned a high salary. She lived in a small one-bedroom house, walked everywhere, and bought her clothes at rummage sales. When she died, people expected her estate to be modest. Instead, she left over $7 million to Lake Forest College. How did a secretary accumulate $7 million? In 1935, she bought 3 shares of Abbott Laboratories stock for $180 total. She never sold a single share. She reinvested every dividend. She just held on for 70 years. That $180 investment, left alone through the Depression, through World War II, through every crisis and panic of the 20th century, turned into $7 million through the simple power of compound interest and patience. Grace Groner did not need a financial advisor. She did not need complex strategies. She did not need to understand options or derivatives or any sophisticated investment technique. She just needed to buy good assets, hold them forever, and let time work its magic. This is the secret that the financial services industry does not want you to know. Building wealth is not complicated. It is simple. What makes it difficult is the emotional discipline to stay the course when everyone around you is panicking or chasing the next hot investment. Let me also address the question of what to do if you are starting late, because I know many people watching this are in their 50s or 60s, and they feel like it is too late to make a difference. It is not too late. It is never too late to improve your financial situation. As you have less time for compound interest to work, that is a mathematical reality you cannot change, but there are still meaningful steps you can take. First, you can dramatically reduce your expenses. Every dollar you cut from your monthly spending is equivalent to having $25 more in savings at a 4% withdrawal rate. If you can reduce your monthly expenses by $1,000, that is like having an extra $300,000 in retirement savings. Second, you can delay retirement if your health allows. Every year you work longer is a year you are saving instead of spending. A year your investments can grow, and a year less that your retirement savings need to last. Working until 67 or 70 instead of 65 can have an enormous impact on your financial security. Third, you can optimize Social Security. The difference between claiming benefits at 62 versus 70 can be over 50% in monthly income. For many people, delaying Social Security is the single best financial decision they can make. Fourth, you can downsize your housing. If you are approaching retirement with a large house that you no longer need, selling it and moving to something smaller can free up hundreds of thousands of dollars while also reducing your ongoing expenses. Fifth, you can consider part-time work in retirement. Many retirees find that they actually want to work part-time, not for the money, but for the social connection and sense of purpose. If that work also provides income, so much the better. The point is that your options are not limited to what you have already saved. Your entire financial picture, including expenses, timing, and income sources, can be optimized regardless of your age. Let me tell you what concerns me most about the current state of retirement in America. It is not the statistics, as bad as they are. It is the psychology. I see young people who have given up on the idea of retirement entirely. They figure the system is rigged, savings are pointless. They might as well enjoy today because tomorrow is hopeless anyway. This nihilism is understandable given the challenges they face, but it is self-defeating. I see middle-aged people who are paralyzed by the gap between where they are and where they think they should be. They feel like failures because they do not have what the financial magazines tell them they should have. This shame prevents them from taking the small, consistent steps that could actually improve their situation. I see older people who are terrified because they approach retirement without adequate savings. They work longer than they want to. They deny themselves basic comforts. They live in constant anxiety about money. None of this serves anyone. The financial services industry has created a culture of fear and inadequacy that benefits them, not you. Every time you feel bad about your savings, you are more likely to pay for expensive financial advice. Buy complex products you do not understand. Take risks you should not take. Here is what I want you to take away from everything I have shared today. Your financial situation is probably not as bad as you think relative to your peers. The statistics show that most Americans are in the same boat. You are not alone, and you are not a failure. The $1 million threshold is not a requirement for a secure retirement. What matters is building a financial structure where your income exceeds your expenses, whatever those numbers might be. Small, consistent actions compound over time. If you start today, even with modest amounts, you will be better off than if you wait for the perfect moment that never comes. The fundamentals of wealth building have not changed in centuries. Live below your means, avoid debt, save consistently, invest patiently. These principles worked for my teachers who retired comfortably on modest savings. They will work for you. I have been investing for over 70 years. I have seen bull markets and bear markets. I have seen recessions and recoveries. I have seen financial innovations come and go. Through all of it, the basic principles remain the same. The people who build wealth are not the smartest or the luckiest. They are the most disciplined. They are the ones who understand that wealth is built through countless small decisions, not through one big break. Every time you choose to save instead of spend, you are building wealth. Every time you avoid debt, you are building wealth. Every time you invest for the long term instead of gambling for short-term gains, you are building wealth. These decisions might seem insignificant in the moment, but compounded over decades, they create financial security that no statistic can take away from you. The question of who really has $1 million in retirement savings has a shocking answer. Almost no one. But that answer misses the more important point. Financial security does not come from reaching an arbitrary number. It comes from building a life where your needs are met, where you have a cushion against emergencies, where you can sleep at night without worrying about money. That kind of security is available to far more people than the statistics suggest. It requires discipline, patience, and wisdom, but it does not require you to be in the top 10% of savers. I have seen people with very little money who were wealthy in every way that matters. And I have seen people with enormous fortunes who were poor in spirit, always anxious, never satisfied. The choice between those two paths has very little to do with the number in your account and everything to do with how you choose to live your life. Start where you are. Use what you have, do what you can. The rest will take care of itself. I want to leave you with one final thought about the nature of wealth and what it actually means to be financially secure. Over my long career, I have met thousands of wealthy people, billionaires, millionaires, successful entrepreneurs, famous investors, and I have also met thousands of people who society would consider poor or middle class, workers, teachers, farmers, small business owners. Here's what I have learned from observing all these people. The correlation between money and happiness is much weaker than most people believe. Beyond a certain point, usually the point where your basic needs are met and you have some cushion for emergencies, additional wealth does not make people happier. What makes people happy is meaningful work, close relationships, good health, a sense of purpose. These things cannot be bought. No matter how much you have in your retirement account, I have seen miserable billionaires who are consumed by anxiety, paranoia, and an insatiable hunger for more. And I've seen joyful people of modest means who wake up grateful every day, who find meaning in their work and relationships, who sleep peacefully at night. This is not to say that money does not matter. It does. Financial stress is real and destructive. Not having enough money to pay your bills or afford medical care is genuinely terrible. Having a financial cushion provides real security and peace of mind, but the obsession with reaching arbitrary numbers, the constant comparison to others, the endless pursuit of more, these things undermine the very happiness that money is supposed to provide. I have tried to model a different approach in my own life. Despite having more money than I could ever spend, I live simply. I do work I love. I spend time with people I care about. I try to be useful. I do not measure my worth by my net worth. This perspective has served me well for over 70 years, and I believe it can serve you too, regardless of how much or how little you have saved for retirement. The statistics on retirement savings are stark. Very few Americans have $1 million saved, but behind those statistics are real people, each with their own story, their own circumstances, their own opportunities to build a better financial future. You cannot change the past. You cannot control the economy. You cannot guarantee the future. But you can control your own behavior. You can spend less than you earn. You can avoid destructive debt. You can save consistently. You can invest wisely. You can build a life where your needs are met and your fears are quieted. That is financial security, not a number on a statement, a way of living that brings peace of mind and genuine freedom. I have spent my whole life thinking about money. And after all these decades, after all these billions of dollars, here is what I know for certain. The best investment you can make is in yourself. The best return you can earn is peace of mind. And the true measure of wealth is not what you have, but whether you have enough. Most people do not have $1 million saved for retirement. But most people can still achieve financial security if they are willing to do what it takes. The path is simple, even if it is not easy. And simple, consistent, patient behavior applied over many years will take you further than any get-rich-quick scheme, any complex investment strategy, any financial product sold by someone who profits from your confusion. That is the truth about retirement savings in America. It is harder than it should be. The system has real problems. The statistics are genuinely alarming. But within all of that, there is a path forward for anyone willing to take it. The question is not whether you can reach $1 million. The question is whether you can build a financial life that serves your actual needs and gives you genuine security. That goal is achievable for far more people than the statistics suggest. And it starts with understanding what wealth really means and having the discipline to pursue it in a sustainable way. I have done this for over 70 years. The principles have not changed, and they never will.